you for taking the time to talk to us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're going to be one of the keynote speakers at the DCS this year. So I was wondering if you could give everyone here listening a brief summary of you and your background.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Eytan Buchman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at the Freightos Group. The Freightos Group is basically two companies. It's Freightos.com, which is the world's largest freight marketplace, and WebCargo, which is a company that focuses on connecting carriers with freight forwarders. So we work with about 2,000 freight forwarders around the world and about 300 carriers. I think like a lot of people, I didn't grow up dreaming about getting into logistics, right? Like everybody wants to be an astronaut or a firefighter, and logistics technology is not something that I dreamed about. I was in career military for a while, and when I finished, I was kind of looking out at the high-tech industry, and I spoke to a lot of different companies. And one of the companies I spoke to was Freightos, which at the time was just 3 or 4 people. And I love kind of messaging and communication and finding the right message for the right audience. And high tech just seemed perfect, but this person came to me and started to talk about logistics and freight, and I literally knew nothing about it. But I started to read a little bit, and it hit a nerve. There's something about the fact that it's one of these like basic infrastructure levels. It's easily the least sexy industry, but it's gained so much importance. Like when I look at Amazon and Alibaba and the largest companies that are shaping the world, logistics has become such an important pillar. So maybe I've been at Freightos for a little bit too long, and I drank the Kool-Aid and got a little bit too excited. I know my friends don't like when I start talking about logistics, but ever since I landed at Freightos, I got the logistics bug, and I've basically been doing a lot of research since I started, just tracking a lot about logistics technology as a whole. It's become kind of both my job, but also a passion, and yeah, that's kind of my background. I've just been growing, evolving within the logistics industry while at Freightos as Freightos expands to be a larger, more successful company.
So you've been in the logistics industry for many years now?
Not a ton. I think it's funny when you go to, or when you used to pre-COVID, go to logistics events. Whenever you talk to people, they always introduce themselves like they're in the military. In the military, everybody says, my name is John, and I've been serving for 10 years or 12 years. And at trade shows and logistics, everybody would always say, my name is whatever. My name is Mike, and I've been in logistics for 20 years. I haven't been in logistics. I've been in for about 6 or 7 years, I would say. So it's not a ton of time, but it's a super interesting industry, and it's accessible, and people within the industry have really, I feel like welcomed me with open arms, and it's been really interesting and exhilarating to speak to people and learn from them.
So, but seeing that you've been in the industry for 6 years, what have you learned now that you would give as advice to yourself when you started 6 years ago?
That's a great question. So, I think I've learned so much that I think it's more like what advice. Kind of, it would probably just be like, hey, Eytan, forget everything you think you know, because this is like going to be a totally new ride. One of the things that I did when we were this like startup, and you look at how a startup can go to market, and the first way I did it was kind of going out to the industry and saying everything is broken and it's so old fashioned and we need a change. And that's kind of like this, it's the gut reaction. And I think a lot of companies do it, but it was absolutely the wrong approach. It was the wrong approach because I didn't know what I was talking about. So I could say things were broken, and maybe, half the time I was right, or 20% of the time I was right. But realistically, I wasn't at a point from a credibility perspective where I could say it. And even if I was right, there's no reason why somebody should listen. And it took me a while to understand that before you have the right to talk about that, you have to prove that you know it. So once that kind of penny dropped and I really understood it, I basically set out to become the logistics technology guy. And we would do a weekly and monthly blog post and summary and email and webinars about logistics technology. Most of it that had nothing to do with Freightos, but really just focusing on how can I make sure that people look at me and say, hey, logistics technology, that guy knows what he's talking about, as a medium to market Freightos better, but really because I needed to get there both for people to listen, but also for me to understand. And I think that idea that when you go into something new, don't just go out guns blazing and shouting. Stop, look around a little bit, orient yourself, make a decision on how you're going to approach it, and then act. And I was young and dumb, and I'm still dumb. I'm not as young, but at least now I know that like when you go into a new situation, you look around and you kind of need to understand exactly what you're looking at first.
It sounds as if you've had quite some experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it was like a wake. Yeah, I did. We had a lot of like waking up experiences where you talk to somebody, you know, and you're having this conversation, and maybe you can hold your own for one or two questions, and then they could ask something so asinine like, "Hey, how tall is the 20-foot container?" And you're like, "I have no clue. Like, I don't know." And you realize you're just so ignorant about it. So I felt like at a certain point I had to retreat, learn, understand what was happening, and then keep on going forward.
Well, that leads to my next question. During your career, what would you say has been your most, I don't know, embarrassing or memorable moment?
So yeah, this is also, and it was a learning experience. This was before I was in logistics. I was a military spokesperson, and the way that it worked is basically that we did not get a lot of training. They just kind of like threw us into the job and said, "Go do it." And the first day that I was on the job, there was this, it was like this event that happened, and I was the only person in the office, and CNN were there, and they're like, "Hey, we need to interview somebody." And I had no clue what I was doing. And they're like, "Oh, well, you need to go on camera." And I called up my commander, and I was like, "Hey, should I be doing this? Is this okay? I don't know what I'm doing." And when I started, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm doing it, I'm doing it, I'm doing it." And then like they started doing the interview, and I was horrible. Like I bombed. I was absolutely terrible. And this is the military. So I was sure like when I got off the camera, they were going to take me out back and shoot me. Like I was just like that bad. And I called up my commander, and I was like, "Hey, I got bad news." And he was like, "It's okay. Like, don't worry about it. You can get back up. Like, you'll do better next time." And it was a real learning experience where when somebody kind of trusts you, puts you in front of a camera, or puts you in charge of marketing something, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's like an interview or whether it's marketing something. The first time when I started marketing at Freightos, like I went onto Wikipedia and searched marketing plan. Like, you don't need to know all these things. If somebody trusts that you're going to do it, you can go out and you'll do it. And maybe you'll screw up the first time, but you'll get out there and you'll do it better next time. So I think that was kind of one of the most embarrassing moments that I've had, because it was like live on international television, or not live, but pre-recorded for international television. But I think it turned into a learning experience like many years later, once I could look back and laugh, many, many years later.
You also said that you wanted to be an expert in the technology.
Yes.
And we can safely say that you have become that. So in terms of the digital revolution here in the container shipping industry, what would you say that we should be keeping an eye on in the future, look out for?
Oh my gosh. I mean, everything, just like literally, I think everything can change, nothing can change. Like, we don't really know. You know, there's like this kind of quip that many people in this space start most of their presentations off with, by saying that the most innovative thing to happen in the past 100 years was the shipping container, and nothing real has happened since then. And I agree with one sentiment there. I think the most impactful part of the container is standardization. It's that things got standard. So the ship that you have leaving the port in Hamburg will have a crane there. And when it gets to Long Beach, there's going to be a crane there, and they'll be able to take it off, and they'll be able to put it onto a truck, and it's going to fit every truck. And when that truck gets to an Amazon warehouse, they're going to be able to unload it. And that aspect of standardization is really what unlocked the doors for global trade. Instead of playing this Tetris game every time you load a ship, you have a container that you could just slide on. And I think that's hitting the logistics industry right now, where freight companies, logistics companies have always had technology, right? This is not new. Everybody's always had computer systems. The biggest change that I see is everybody used to have their own computer systems with their own loose cargo. And now people start to have technology systems that can speak to other systems. So it's not just the carrier selling goods, you know, on their own website. It's an API on a carrier website that can plug into a forwarder website, and that can plug into the BCO's website or into Amazon's website, and they're all speaking to each other. So I think that's the biggest transition, the fact that suddenly A can talk to B in real time. You don't need a human involved. The human can get involved at some point, but the standardization is unlocking all these doors in order to help us take better advantage of data, help companies improve their efficiency between different companies rather than just internally. And I think that we're just starting that revolution, but I'm really excited about it.
And you're going to be a keynote speaker at the DCS this year. And your keynote is called "If You Build It, They Will Click." What exactly is that going to be about?
So there's been a couple of false starts. Kind of my sweet spot, the part that I really enjoy talking about in logistics, is digital freight sales. Not because I think it's all about sales, just because I think in many cases, online sales is kind of a precursor for downstream optimization, right? The real driver, at the end of the day, the real driver of technology is money. And one of the best ways to see, is there money in this, is selling something online. And there's been a bunch of false starts over the past 5, 6, 7 years where a entrepreneurial startup or a large legacy logistics provider will start selling online. They'll build this very, very flashy website. They'll launch it and nothing happens, right? So like they'll build it, but no one will come. And I think recently, the historical reason for that is that in many cases, technology is not the barrier for adoption, right? There were touchscreen phones before iPhones came along. I remember I used to have this thing called a Creative Nomad, which was this really crappy, it was kind of like an iPod, like 2 years before the iPod, but it was a little bit bigger and wasn't as like sexy as an iPod. Sorry, an iPod, yeah. It just didn't look as good. And it never really took off. And I would show it off to my friends. And I'd be like, hey, look how cool I am. I have like 1,000 songs here. And they'd be like, I don't know what that is, but shut up, I'm listening to my CD player. And then 2 or 3 years later, the iPod launched, and so everybody was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And there, the lesson is that it's not just about technology, it's also about culture, right? You need to have technology that changes, but you also need to have the people that use that technology that change at the same time. So for me, if you build it, they will click is basically, if you build a platform, what needs to happen on that platform in order to make sure that people use it? Because nobody wants to build software. You know, if you build a SaaS platform in a forest, does anybody hear it? No, like, you know, you kind of need to make sure that both those things come in hand in hand. And that's kind of what I'm going to be discussing, that convergence of technology and culture and how different companies are kind of reflecting on that, recognizing it, and then taking advantage.
And why are you excited to talk about that at the DCS?
I think that if you look back, I once ran this like quick little research study where I looked at a bunch of different leaflets or brochures from different logistics trade shows. And there's this pretty clear trend starting back 10 years ago. There used to be 1 or 2 panels that would talk about technology. And slowly by slowly, it built out to more and more panels and more people talking about technology. But usually it's a freight conference that talks about technology. And what ends up happening there is you have people that don't understand technology sitting, and in order to address those people, everybody dumbs it down a little bit, right? It just becomes catering to the lowest common denominator. And what I like about DCS is the fact that it really is people that understand technology, that get technology, that breathe technology. So when you go in, you don't need to clarify the difference between a TEU and an API. Everybody understands both of those acronyms. So you're not starting at square one. You can jump in and just like get straight to the meat.
So why, if people already know a lot about technology, why should they then attend your session?
I mean, you know, the only way you can ever move forward is just by listening to other people. I'm a firm believer that, you know, I know nothing and everybody else is going through their own experiences and everybody is learning all these things. And if I could take my experience and share it with other people and I can get their experience and accumulate it so that next year at DCS, I can share some of the other things that I've learned, that's where we get stronger. So, you know, we've had this very, very strong like learnings. Our learnings all come from data. We have over 3 million people that come to our website every single year. We learn a lot about digital logistics consumption patterns. And that's what goes into what I'm talking about. So I'm looking forward to hearing other people's insights, but I'm also looking forward to sharing my insights that I picked up so that I can get the insights back from other people as well.
And we're for sure looking forward to hear your session. And we're looking forward to see you again at the DCS. So thank you very much for talking to us today.
Awesome, looking forward.
In between your sessions, you can enjoy some awesome keynotes and workshops to which you can actually bookmark on your schedule in advance. And the event is open for 24 hours to accommodate everyone all over the world.